There's this old hotel downtown that's been abandoned for years. It was fancy back in the day, but it's been empty since 2007 when the owners went bankrupt. Me and my buddy Chris like exploring abandoned places, just for the photos, you know? We're not there to steal stuff or anything. We just like the history, the weird beauty of places that everyone else has forgotten. We'd been wanting to check out this hotel for months, but the main entrances were always too visible from the street. Then Chris found out about a service entrance in the back alley that wasn't boarded up properly. We went on a Tuesday night, figuring there'd be fewer people around to notice us. Getting in was easier than we expected. The door had a chain on it, but it was loose enough for us to squeeze through. The place was exactly what we hoped for. Old furniture covered in dust, peeling wallpaper, that sort of thing. The lobby still had this massive chandelier hanging from the ceiling, most of the crystals still intact. We spent about an hour taking pictures, using our phone flashlights to get the right spooky lighting. "Dude, we have to check out the upper floors," Chris said, shining his light toward a grand staircase. The steps looked solid enough, so we went up to the second floor, which had a bunch of hotel rooms. Most of the doors were locked, but a few were open, and we managed to get some cool shots of the old beds and bathrooms. We were heading toward the stairs to the third floor when something caught my eye. There was this old staff hallway off to the side with a faded sign on the wall pointing to service elevators. I got pretty excited when I saw that. I've always been fascinated by old elevators. All those mechanical parts working together, the history behind them. I looked at Chris and nodded toward the hallway. We could check out the third floor later. At the end of the hallway, we found the elevator. It was one of those old kinds with the metal scissor gate inside a regular door. There was a handwritten sign taped to it that said "Out of Service" in faded marker. The outer door had a small gap, like it hadn't closed properly. "Think we can get it open?" I asked. Chris was already wedging his fingers into the crack. "Help me out," he said. We both pulled, and after some effort the door creaked open just enough for us to see inside. The elevator car was still there, stuck between floors. We could see the top half of it, old brass fixtures, wood paneling, all covered in dust. "This is perfect for Instagram," Chris said, pulling out his phone. He turned on his flashlight app and aimed it into the elevator. We took a bunch of pictures, some just of the elevator, and some selfies with our heads poking through the doorway, making scared faces. That's when we heard it. A faint scratching sound like chalk on a blackboard. We both froze. The sound was coming from inside the elevator. "What is that?" I whispered. Chris shrugged, but his eyes were wide. We shined our lights around, trying to find the source. The sound was getting louder, more deliberate. It was coming from the back wall of the elevator. And then we saw it. On the wood-paneled wall, letters were appearing. Slowly, one by one, as if someone was writing them. But there was no pen, no chalk, nothing. Just the scratching sound and the letters forming in the dust. C-H-R-I-S. Chris. We both just stood there, watching. Neither of us said anything. Then, after a pause, more letters appeared below the first name. J-A-S-O-N. Jason. That's my name. We looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. This had to be some kind of prank. Maybe someone knew we were coming here and was messing with us, but we hadn't told anyone. And who would go to all this trouble? Before we could decide what to do, A line started forming across both names, slowly crossing them out. The scratching got louder, more aggressive. The elevator car shook and made a weird noise. Chris started backing away from the elevator, saying we needed to get out of there. I was already turning to leave. That's when the elevator fell. The car crashed down the elevator hole with a super loud metal sound. The force of it knocked us both backward. My head hit something hard and everything went black. I woke up in the hospital. Chris was in the next bed, his arm in a cast. Turns out we'd been found in the hallway by some homeless guy who'd been sleeping in the hotel. He heard the crash and our shouts and called 911. The paramedics said we were lucky. Just some bruises, a mild concussion for me, and a broken arm for Chris. They kept us overnight for observation. The police came by to ask what happened. We told them we were urban exploring, fell, and got hurt. We didn't mention the names appearing on the elevator wall. Who would believe us? And this is the last time we went exploring abandoned buildings. It was almost midnight when I finally figured out what was wrong with the spreadsheet. One misplaced decimal point had thrown off the entire balance sheet I'd been working on. That's the thing about being an accountant. One tiny mistake can mess up everything. If I spot something that's not quite right, I can't bring myself to leave until I've figured it out, you know? So I'm often the last one to leave our office on the 6th floor of this downtown office tower. The office was completely empty by then. Not even the cleaning crew was around anymore. When I finally shut down my computer, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. The walk to the elevator felt longer than usual. When I got to the elevator bank, only one was still running this late, the one in the north corner. I pressed the button and waited, listening to the cables move as the car made its way to my floor. When it arrived, I stepped in and hit L for lobby. The doors closed, and I leaned against the back wall, the kind of tired that sinks deep into your bones after a long day of staring at numbers. My shoulders slumped, and I let my head rest against the wall, closing my eyes for just a second. When I opened them, something felt off. The elevator was moving, but in the wrong direction. I could feel it going up instead of down. I looked at the panel. The L button was definitely lit up, but the number display above the door was counting up. 7, 8, 9. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I must be more tired than I thought. The elevator slowed to a stop at 13. But that didn't make any sense. Our building doesn't even have a 13th floor. It's always 12 and then straight to 14, because of that whole superstition about 13 being unlucky. I stood frozen, not sure what to do. The hallway in front of me looked similar to my floor, but things weren't quite right. The lighting was too bright, almost harsh. The air felt cold, and it was completely quiet. Not even the usual hum you hear in buildings. I reached for the close door button, but it didn't work. I tried several times, pressing harder each time. Nothing. The doors stayed open like the elevator was waiting for me to step out. I hit the lobby button again. Still nothing. After a minute of trying every button on the panel, I realized I might be stuck. I pressed the call button for help, but nothing happened. No sound, no light, just silence. I took a careful step into the hallway, hoping to find a staircase or some way out. The walls were blank, no logos, no signs, no pictures, just smooth white walls that made the place really quiet. I walked down the hall looking for a staircase. The layout was similar to my floor, but felt like someone had copied it, but left stuff out. There were office doors with frosted glass, but no names or numbers on them. I tried one handle, locked, then another, also locked. As I turned another corner, I nearly bumped into someone. A woman about my age was standing there, wearing an outdated pencil skirt and a high-necked white blouse that seemed too formal for the hour. She looked just as surprised to see me as I was to see her. She asked me who I was in a whisper, looking over her shoulder like she was scared someone might hear us. I told her I worked on the 6th floor and had somehow ended up here when the elevator messed up. I asked if she worked in the building too. She shook her head slightly and said, "Not exactly." She didn't explain more, just kept staring at me with this weird look. After a moment, she told me I shouldn't be here and that nobody was supposed to come to this floor. I told her I was just trying to find my way back to the elevator or stairs. Her face changed then, like she suddenly had hope instead of fear. She asked if I knew how to leave, stepping closer. She told me she'd been trying to find a way out, but the doors all locked behind her and the elevators never came when she tried to call them. Something about this didn't make sense. If she didn't work here, how did she get in? And why couldn't she leave the same way? But it was late. I was tired, and having someone else in this strange place felt better than being alone. I offered to show her where the elevator had dropped me off. As we walked, she stayed close, sometimes touching my arm like she was afraid we'd get separated. She kept her voice low as she asked me stuff about the building, about my job, about how I'd gotten here. But whenever I asked about her, she'd change the subject or give me answers that didn't really tell me anything. She looked normal at first, just a woman in office clothes with a neat ponytail and not much makeup. But the longer we walked, the more I noticed little things that seemed weird. She never blinked, not once. When we reached the elevator, the doors were still open, exactly as I'd left them. She stared at them like she couldn't believe what she was seeing, half hopeful, half doubtful. She whispered, asking if this was really the way out. I stepped in first and held my hand out to her. She hesitated for just a second, then took it. Her hand felt cold and not quite right, like touching plastic instead of skin. I tried not to show I noticed. I pressed the lobby button, and this time the doors closed right away. As we went down, she got more excited, moving around the small space, touching the walls, smiling. She kept saying, "Finally," under her breath, over and over. The elevator slowed as we reached the lobby, and she moved closer to the doors, ready to step out. When the door opened, I gestured for her to go ahead, but she insisted I should go first, saying it was just proper manners, though there was something a little too intense in her smile as she said it. I stepped out and turned to continue our conversation, curious about what she'd do now that we were out. But there was no one there. The elevator was empty. I looked around, thinking she must have slipped past me somehow, but the lobby was empty except for the night security guard at the front desk, who gave me a weird look. I stepped back to the elevator and looked inside. Nothing. I checked the other elevators too, but they were all on different floors according to the numbers above the doors. I walked home that night instead of taking my usual bus, needing the fresh air and time to think. I told myself I was just super tired, that maybe I'd even fallen asleep in the elevator and dreamed the whole thing. I never saw that woman again after that night. I've checked the employee directory, asked around different departments, even hung around the lobby watching people come and go. Nobody matching her description works in our building. I tried telling a couple coworkers what happened. They think I just fell asleep at my desk and had some weird dream. My boss even suggested I should take it easy on the overtime for a while. Sometimes I ride in that north elevator now on purpose. Not every day, but when I'm working late and everyone else has gone home. I stand there with my finger hovering over button 13, which doesn't exist on the panel, of course, just 12, and then 14. I press 12 and watch the numbers climb, hoping it'll keep going up, take me back to that strange floor. But it never does. I wonder if she's still up there, waiting. I wonder if she'll ever find another way out. And sometimes when the elevator stops between floors for just a second, I hold my breath, half hoping, half afraid that when the doors open, I'll see that empty white hallway again. I took this night security job at this fancy apartment building, thinking it would be easy money. Midnight to 8 a.m., 5 nights a week, mostly just sitting at a desk in the lobby watching cameras. The building has 30 floors of expensive apartments where rich people live, and at night, most of them are either sleeping or out at parties. So it's usually pretty quiet, which is fine by me. I'd been working there about a month when I first noticed him. The man from one of the upper floors. Middle-aged guy, always in a nice suit even at weird hours. He'd nod at me when he came through the lobby, but never really talked. The other guard told me he'd lived in the building for years. Said he was some kind of investment banker or something. One night around 2 a.m., the man came in looking wrecked. His tie was loose, hair messed up, like he'd been out drinking. He stumbled a bit walking to the elevator. I asked if he needed help, and he just stared at me for a second before saying he was fine. But something about his voice, all empty and flat, made me remember it. After that, I started noticing him more and more during my night shifts. He had this strange routine of taking elevator rides at odd hours, long after most residents were asleep. Sometimes he would just go straight to his floor, but other nights he would ride all the way up to the top floor, disappear for a few minutes, and then come back down again. Whenever he passed by my desk, he would give me a slight nod, but that was about it. He barely said a word to anyone. About 2 weeks into this pattern, something weird happened. I was doing my rounds when I heard the elevator ding. It was around 3 a.m., and when I looked over, there was the same man holding the elevator door open. From my seat, I could see him talking to someone. His head tilted slightly, as if he was having a conversation with whoever was inside the elevator. I couldn't see past him to tell who he might be talking to. I moved closer, trying not to be obvious about watching. He was asking someone to please just listen to him. Then I heard him saying something about how they'd promised to keep it between them, and asking why they had to bring her into this. I had no idea who her was, but it sounded like this guy was caught between two women or something. His voice kept getting more desperate as he mentioned something about how everything was ruined now, and that he couldn't go back to how things were before. Then he suddenly looked right at me, went silent, and stepped into the elevator. The doors closed before I could say anything. I checked the cameras right away. That's when I saw something I hadn't expected. The footage showed the man standing at the open elevator door, talking intensely, but the elevator was completely empty. There was no one there at all. When I tracked which floor he went to, it showed the elevator going straight to the top floor, the 30th floor, which is just roof access and some mechanical rooms. I didn't see him come back down that night, which was strange. I even went up to check the roof access around 7 a.m. before my shift ended, but the door was locked and everything seemed normal. The next night, he came through the lobby around midnight. He looked tired but normal. When he saw me, he actually stopped and apologized for how weird he'd been acting the night before. Said he'd been working too hard and needed sleep. I just nodded and said no problem. But something about his eyes seemed off, like he wasn't really there. I've noticed that about a lot of the rich folks in this building. They're either totally normal or completely out there. Must be something about having too much money and not enough real problems to worry about. A couple days later, I was in the break room when one of the residents, an older woman who'd lived in the building for decades, came in looking for the lost and found. We got to talking about the building, and I mentioned the weird hours I sometimes see people coming and going. She nodded knowingly, and asked if I'd noticed that man from the 22nd floor, the one in the expensive suits who always looks sad. I said yeah, I'd seen him around. She leaned in like she was about to share the juiciest piece of gossip and told me his whole story. 3 years ago, there was this terrible incident. The man was having an affair with a younger woman who worked at his company. According to the older resident, everyone in the building kind of knew about it. The woman would visit whenever his wife was out of town. But then one night, something went wrong. The affair had been going on for months, and the younger woman was getting tired of being the secret. She showed up unannounced in the lobby, demanding to see him. He came down to meet her, and they started arguing right there by the elevators. She was insisting on going up to his apartment to tell his wife everything. He kept trying to talk her out of it, saying they needed to handle this differently. They got into the elevator together, still fighting about it. He was begging her not to do this, not while his wife was home. But when they reached his floor, she suddenly changed her mind. The young woman just stood there in the elevator and said she couldn't do it anymore, any of it. While the doors were still open, she reached over and pressed the button for the roof. The man tried to pull her out, but she pushed him away. By the time he realized what she was planning, the doors had closed. He ran up the emergency stairs, trying to reach the roof before her, but he was too late. She jumped before he could stop her. His wife found out everything after the police investigation. She couldn't live with what happened or forgive him for the affair, so she divorced him. He still lives in the same apartment, all alone now. And here's the creepy part. It all happened on March 15th, exactly 3 years before I saw him talking to that empty elevator. I started paying more attention to him after hearing all that. Most nights he was normal, just a guy coming and going. But sometimes, especially late at night, he'd get this distant look. Once I saw him standing in front of the elevator for almost 5 minutes, just staring at the doors before finally pressing the button. Then it happened, March 15th again, exactly 1 year since I'd seen him talking to the empty elevator. I was at the desk when he came in around 2:30 a.m. He wasn't drunk this time, but there was something determined in the way he walked. He went straight to the elevator, but instead of pressing the button, he just stood there. Then he started talking again, softly at first. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but he was clearly having a conversation with someone who wasn't there. The elevator doors opened on their own. Probably someone had called it from another floor, but it was empty. He stepped back, shaking his head, and said loud enough for me to hear that it wasn't time yet, that he couldn't, and he was sorry. The elevator doors closed, and he just stood there staring at them. Then he turned and saw me watching. For a second I thought he might get angry, but instead, he walked over to my desk. He asked me if I believed people could get stuck. I wasn't sure what he meant, so I just asked him, "Stuck where?" He told me, "They get stuck in moments, in between floors," and then he tapped his temple, as if to show he meant up in their heads. Before I could answer, the elevator dinged again. He looked over his shoulder at it, then back at me. He told me she was still in there. He said that every year, on the same night and at the same time, she gets into the elevator demanding to see his wife, and he can't convince her not to go to the roof. She's waiting for him to stop her this time. I didn't know what to say. He just nodded, like I'd answered him anyway, then walked back to the elevator. This time when the doors opened, he got in. I watched on the camera as he rode up to the 30th floor. I should have called someone. That's what the protocol says. Any suspicious behavior, call it in. But what would I say? That he was talking to the spirit of his dead mistress? So I watched the monitors instead. He got out on 30. The roof camera showed him walking to the edge, the same spot where she had jumped, and just standing there, looking down. He didn't move, just stood there in the cold. I kept staring at the monitor, my hand hovering over the phone. I should call someone, right? That's what they tell us in training. But my stomach was in knots. What if I made things worse? What if he was just getting some air and I sent people bursting onto the roof? By the time I finally decided I needed to do something, he was already turning around. I watched him walk back inside and take the elevator down. I felt relieved and switched to the elevator camera and saw him standing there, just staring at the doors. On my control panel, the elevator's position indicator showed it stopping at the 22nd floor. He just stood completely still during the whole ride down, like he was completely drained. The doors opened at his floor, and he disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. Next morning, when the day guard came to take over my shift, I didn't mention any of it. I should be knocked out tired after staying up all night, but I can't seem to fall asleep. I just keep thinking about that man and what he's seeing when he looks into that empty elevator.